on, everybody? Welcome back. I thought it'd be fun to talk about the 5 most interesting off seasons coming up here, as the Eagles have just closed the door on this season with a big Super Bowl victory, making me look pretty good after hyping them up all year. So my criteria for this list is going to be, yes, what's interesting in terms of what I'm looking forward to following, but more importantly, whose off seasons are really going to impact how I'm viewing these teams going into August and training camp. Who has the most room for growth, or just a lot of question marks that need answered, all that stuff. So we're going to start off here with number 5. We've got the Cleveland Browns, and they're on this list because of all of those assets they have, cap space, and those draft picks. They pick 1, 4. They have a bunch of other picks. Now, a lot of people thought they were going to be better this year. Ultimately, it was one critical mistake in drafting Deshaun Kaiser that really backfired. They had to play him to find out if he was going to be any good. I thought it was a terrible choice when they picked him. I did not think he was ready. I thought he was a huge project. But it's time to move on from Kaiser. That's my answer there. But look at the Panthers back in, 2011? And this was Colin Cowherd's thing coming into this year. I'm not going to take credit for this. But, you know, another Notre Dame quarterback for the Panthers they took in the 2nd round, Jimmy Clausen, and they were awful, but it allowed them to get Cam Newton and be one of the more competitive teams for the next decade. So is that going to be Cleveland this year? Do they take Sam Darnold, my number 1 quarterback on the board? Do they take Josh Allen? And does that really spice things up here in Cleveland? What do they do with the 4th pick? Do they get Saquon Barkley, Minkah Fitzpatrick, and then just really load up on talent? I mean, in a bad AFC, if they can get that quarterback thing figured out, you got Josh Gordon coming back, hopefully doesn't get in trouble. I really think Cleveland could turn it around, maybe have a Bills-like season and sneak into the playoffs in a poor AFC with 9 wins or so. But it's really going to come down to the offseason. They got plenty of money to spend in free agency too. So let's move on away from Cleveland to the number 4 team here, the New England Patriots. And this is interesting to me because of all of this stuff that's been going on. You know, the coaching power dispute here between Bill Belichick and his control of the roster and the ownership. He wants to move on from Tom Brady and go with Jimmy Garoppolo. Ownership says no. And then you got this new story here, benching Malcolm Butler. You got coaches leaving. Is Josh McDaniels going to stay now all of a sudden, coming out in the media today? So a lot of questions going on with the power in New England. Ultimately, I think we all know what's going to happen. They're going to be AFC favorites. They are already opening the year as the Super Bowl favorites. But I'm really excited to see how it all plays out. And they got some contracts to figure out as well. I think Brandon Cooks is up. And what do they do with Malcolm Butler? Probably going to let him go, I would think. But I'm really just interested to see how this all plays out. I think it's all going to be okay. I don't think it's the end of an era like a lot of people have been asking. But could it be? And I think there is a chance. I think Bill Belichick is frustrated with how that whole situation was handled. Looking forward to see how that all plays out. And then number 3, we got the 49ers. Really excited to see what happens there. We've seen teams in the past recognize a window, and I say in the past, really in recent years. Seahawks, Broncos, the Eagles this year, think they have what it takes at quarterback, think they can capitalize on a window. Do the 49ers do that? You know, they have a ton of youth, but they didn't lose a game with Jimmy Garoppolo in there. I think that defense could be damn good next year. That D-line could be the best in football. Really like what Reuben Foster brings to the table. So do they go out and sign Tremaine Johnson and then try to get a receiver, maybe Allen Robinson? I don't know. There is a lot that could happen with the 49ers. They have a ton of cap space. They're pretty average in terms of draft capital, but really excited to see what happens there. I mean, they're 20-1 going into the next year already. We're talking about a team that sitting at like week 13, we're talking about them having the number 1 overall pick. Things are just turning around fast for the 49ers, and how much hype continues to build as they potentially get pretty aggressive here in the offseason and try to win now rather than later. They do have to re-sign Garoppolo. That's just inevitable. He was fantastic this year. I think he's already going to enter into next year as a top 8 to 10 quarterback, if not higher. So you pair him with Kyle Shanahan, and you let the minds in that front office go to work. John Lynch has been fantastic. All the moves he made this year were great. Obviously, Garoppolo for a 2nd-round pick was a total steal. So that's number 3 for me. Number 2 is the Green Bay Packers. And how many years in a row has it been the story that this team has not been aggressive, has not been building or the window of Aaron Rodgers' prime. I mean, we're talking about a guy, you bring him out on the football field, and you got the best player on the field no matter who you're playing, and that includes the Patriots, in my opinion. But they get rid of the GM. They finally get rid of Dom Capers, the defensive coordinator that had been there and really struggled. That was a bad fit, a complicated scheme with a bunch of young players because of that draft and develop philosophy there in Green Bay. A lot of changes here in Green Bay, which is a very different thing going on here. And even Aaron Rodgers has admitted it's some uncomfortable stuff. They let his quarterback coach go. He's not happy about that. Offensively, they're going to be fine. The question is defensively, does Kevin King come back and be healthy? But what do? They have some decent cap space. They have some guys to re-sign. And for the first time in a while, this team is picking in the top half of the draft. So they could have the opportunity to add a freak athlete defender on that side of the ball, something they've really lacked. But really, free agency, what do? Do they talk to a Jimmy Graham or a corner like Tremaine Johnson? Maybe see what linebackers are out there, Nigel Bradham, something like that. But just a lot of pieces and holes on this team. And a team that wants to win now, it's a team, they're 9-1, opening as tied with the Eagles for NFC favorites. I mean, they really are a few moves away from being Super Bowl contenders. I mean, they are Super Bowl contenders just because of Aaron. But what do potentially with the new GM there, Brian Gutekunst, to really cement themselves atop the NFL, somewhere they have not been for a long time, if ever. So moving on to number 1 here, and it's actually staying in the NFC North, and we're going with the Vikings. Don't mind the Timberwolves shirt here. Yes, I'm from Minnesota, but I'm really excited to see how this all plays out. I really do think it's one of the biggest question marks of the year is how do the Vikings play this whole thing out, particularly at quarterback. But, first thing I'll talk about is the offensive line. I think it'd be a huge mistake for this team to say, all right, we kind of figured it out. We had some good ratings on the offensive line this year. We were blocking up front. We don't need to address this year because coming into 2017, that was their biggest need. And Joe Burger's probably gone. He's probably going to retire from what I've been hearing. And in those 2 playoff games, this line did not hold up against playoff defenses. And that's really what it comes down to. I think they really need to pound that offensive line as the number 1 priority here. And the thing is, they're reaching that window that you talk about, especially with a defensive team that doesn't have a franchise quarterback. You really need to capitalize on that window because eventually it just gets too expensive and you can't keep it up. So what do they do with this quarterback situation? For me, I would do Nick Foles. You'd give up a 2nd-round pick. It sucks to do that with Philadelphia again, who kind of robbed you for Sam Bradford already. But, he's on a $6-7 million deal. It allows you to continue to build around defense, maybe sign a corner, and also retain your Anthony Barr, Danielle Hunter, Kendricks in the future. But you get an upside guy in Nick Foles. Do they get into the Kirk Cousins conversation? Maybe. It seems a little too expensive for me to predict that. But or do they go into the draft and look at a guy like Baker Mayfield at the end of the 1st or a Kurt Benkert in the 2nd round? Really going to be interesting to see what happens with this offense. And the NFC is stacked next year. They were probably the 3rd best team in the NFC come playoff time this year. I think if they had to go to New Orleans in a game, frankly, they should have lost in Minnesota, it probably would have been mostly New Orleans had they had to go to their stadium. But the NFC is going to be stacked next year, and I think the Vikings know this is their window, even if the conference is getting better. And honestly, I think this last season was their chance. You got Russell Wilson and the Seahawks coming back. You got Jimmy Garoppolo's 49ers rising. You've got the boogeyman Aaron Rodgers within your own division. You're probably looking at wild card already just because of that. So the Vikings is going to be a really interesting offseason. But really all 5 of these teams, and in general, just really excited for this offseason. I'm going through my draft boards, which means I'll be putting out top 10 prospect videos soon, but also those rebuilds for every team. Those will be starting soon, talking about offseason for every team, just like I did a little glimpse of here. But I'm really looking forward to all that. Cheers, everyone. Peace out.